I show 6 o'clock.
So do I.
Would you like me to roll call this meeting?
Let's call the meeting to order, please. Roll call.
Sure. Councilmember Mackey,
Here.
Amara,
He's here.
I can unmute her.
Present.
There we go. Councilmember Berlant,
Here.
Spokley,
Here.
and Mayor Kirby.
Here. Councilmember Berlant, you have a flag behind you. Do you mind joining us in the Pledge of Allegiance? We're all going to stand up and it's going to look a little strange.
Join me for the pledge.
Yes,
I
sir.
pledge allegiance to the
The
flag
flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
Republic
which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilmember Berlant. I have a brief statement I'm going to read before the meeting begins, and then we'll go to agenda approval. Statement to the City Council. I spent 40 years dedicating my life to serving the community of Auburn as a physician and through my volunteer efforts. Am I perfect? No, we're all a little flawed. Have some of my posts, which were meant to be private and made out of frustration, been over the top? Some were, and I regret that. I've never brought politics into this chamber, as our job as city council people is to provide for the public safety and infrastructure of our citizens. Am I angry and frustrated? Yes. I want to share with you where my frustrations have come from. Firefighters aren't allowed to go into a burning building to save lives without the proper equipment and backup. Yet we are asked to do it every day. Like millions of healthcare workers and first responders across the country, like I did today, I go to work every day and put my life on the line against an enemy I can't see without the proper protective gear or testing capability because of the criminal incompetence and disregard of science of this administration. I see nurses, respiratory therapists, other medical staff, first responders, and my medical colleagues, as well as their patients, dying unnecessarily because of this. This president has put us all at risk. I believe history will judge those who stood up against his damaging ideologies and those who did not. As I stated publicly when I was sworn in as mayor, it has always been my intention to step down and nominate Councilmember Berlant, so he also has the opportunity to serve as mayor. So at the next city council meeting, April 27th, I will nominate Councilmember Berlant to serve as mayor for the rest of the year. Thank you. Now, agenda approval. This is a time set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Council members?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a
Yes, Ms.
statement.
Secretary.
I'd like to make a statement as well, if I may, please. I'd like to
Yes,
ask
of
you a
course.
question.
Okay.
In light of all that's happened and what's going on, and I appreciate the fact that you are handing over the gavel in a couple of weeks to Daniel Berlant. I think that in order to represent some calm to our constituents, I think it would be appropriate if you would hand the gavel over to Vice Mayor Spokley this evening and let him run the meeting.
No. Agenda approval. This is the time, as I said, to set aside for council members and or the public to ask for removal, postponement, or a change to the listed sequence of an agenda item. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council.
I move we approve the agenda.
Before we approve the agenda, I do have 3 public comments in regards to this item, and I'd like to share my
In regards to the agenda?
For the agenda approval, I have 3 public comments for an item to be removed.
Okay.
I also have a comment before we move approval.
Let's do Councilmember Spokley's comment first.
So I'd like to suggest to the council that remove item number 8 from this agenda item, or from this agenda. And if you'd like me to give comments now, I can.
You might as well give comments. We haven't had, unless you want to make a motion to remove it, and then we'll discuss it.
I'd like to move that we remove agenda item number 8 from this agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, comments. Anybody in the council have comments related to item number 8?
Yes, I'll go ahead and speak. I read the couple of comments that we got from citizens in our community. I also know that other than the couple of essential committees that we have that through requirements by law, we have to keep running, the other committees have been pressed pause on, i.e. we're not moving forward with any action items, certainly any action items that might include expenditures at this time. For these reasons, and the fact that we've got a lot of other things going on in the city at the moment, I suggest that we defer this at a minimum until our next council agenda, but until a council agenda that is appropriate to the upcoming city, upcoming new mayor.
Any other comments from council members?
Yes, I
Yeah,
have. Okay, go ahead, Sandy.
go ahead, Cheryl. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to concur with Matt because I thought that the staff report was going to have more of the things that Bob had talked about at our February 24th meeting. And we had directed him that we wanted to have them from the city. We wanted to make sure that they were in certain categories that the terms were not all contiguous, that they were 2 and 4 or something of the such. And none of that's been recommended in the agenda. So I'd really like to put it aside until we have a more detailed type of, we can have a more detailed type of discussion on this.
Councilmember Amaro.
Yes. From my perspective, I don't see that there's any basis to delay this. Fact of the matter is, there's been ample opportunity for anyone interested to apply. This has been publicized. It's actually taken quite a while. And we had wonderful applicants. The applicants are highly qualified. They're diverse. They have time. They're successful. They're committed. It wouldn't be fair to them. We have, in fact, I read very closely all these. There's an engineer applied, architect, doctor, photographer. We have people with significant experience from the city and county and state level. I don't think it's fair to delay it. We set out to do this and we went through the process, and now we want to delay it. There's absolutely no reason. From what I can see, there's opportunities too, significant opportunities there that has come to my attention involving solar opportunities, grants. So it's imperative that we go forward. We have, again, if we have a process, we need to follow it, and that's important. I think we need to keep going.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make, oh, sorry, Sandy.
I'm sorry, I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could. I just wanted to add, I think that Councilwoman Amara is dead on as far as the candidate pool we got was very, very skilled. A lot of subject matter experts that I think will help lead us the way. I do, though, share the concerns that were raised as far as the charter needs, I think, a little bit more tweaking before we approve it. And while I think that there's some good energy in moving this forward, with all of our other committees on hold this month due to COVID-19, I am in agreement that I think it can wait at least another meeting for us to fine tune these details.
Anybody else?
I would like to insert the public comment at this time, if I may.
Not yet. I get to speak. If it's all right.
Absolutely.
I absolutely don't think we should delay this. We had more people at this meeting than we've ever had pretty much at any council meeting. That was not legal in nature, and more interest from the community. And it's been quite a while. And we've had plenty of time to go through and fine tune all these things. And these people expect to be appointed or not this evening when they can at least start thinking about what their plans are. The things that you're bringing up, we've talked about before. There's been not a big consensus to change them, and we've already had that discussion. So I will vote, we go ahead and appoint these people tonight. Now, we'll go to public comment, then we'll come back to the council.
Oh, go ahead. Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Hold on, I will share my screen. Hold on just a second. It is. There will be no audio with these public comments. I'll leave the public comment on the screen for long enough for it to be read, and then I will move to the next one.
Amy, one thing, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but part of the wording is cut off because of everybody's picture on the side. Can I move it over a little?
You can probably minimize that thumbnail video on the right during this time. I also emailed the council all of these public comments if you want to switch over to your email and read it in full.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to switch to the second one.
Yes, I think you can go ahead.
And then I did receive one audio file today, public comment on this.
Amy, Mike Holmes here. I have a comment for tonight's meeting having to do with the Sustainability Advisory Committee. And I understand that there is an effort to try to postpone or add some additional candidates to that. And I'm opposed to that. I think we've got some good candidates that will do a fine job. And so I'm urging that the council will go ahead and approve the 5 members that will be from the citizens. So thank you. All right. Bye now.
That is it.
Coming back, is that the end of public comment?
That is.
All right, then I'll bring it back to the council for comments, or first we
Mr.
have to have a
Mayor,
motion, then we'll have comments. So
Mr. Mayor, I've got further comments. When we talked about forming this committee, we talked about getting stakeholders from various sectors in our community, all citizens of the community that would provide a balanced representation moving forward with this committee. In reading through the applications that were presented over the weekend, I couldn't tell whether we had certainly ex-business people, but do we have people representing the chamber like we talked about? And if so, can you point me to who that is? You're
Please
muted.
unmute. Oh.
Do we have anybody specifically representing the chamber, Amy? That's his question. I didn't see anybody who's
Why?
with that designation.
None of
So-
the applications received in my office came directly through the chamber or nominated by the chamber.
Okay. Any other council comments before we go to normally we do a motion and comments, but we're doing it a little differently. Any other council comments?
Yes, you know, we're simply trying to form the committee. We're not necessarily going to meet like as any other committee is. No one's meeting. No one's asking that there be a meeting. We just need to form the committee and get going on it. And again, I want to emphasize that these people all followed the timeline, and it was put out there, and it was a long time for anyone to apply. And apparently, you know, the interest there was quite a few people who applied, and anyone could have applied. And so I think the representation, though, as I said, is diverse and very good. So I really don't see why there needs to be a delay in this.
You're
I'd like to
muted,
make a
Commissioner.
comment.
So-
Just one
so-
more comment.
So we're appointing these people for a one-year term. And I'm not clear that we got a cross-section of our community represented on this committee. So I stand with my position. I'm ready to make a motion that we postpone this approval at least until our following meeting, until we can better understand exactly who these applicants are. And oftentimes what we do in our recruitment for positions on our committees is we actually go out and seek people. We talked about that at our last meeting. We were going to make some phone calls to a few of the business people who we thought would be appropriate on the committee. And I'm not sure that those phone calls happened. I think this needs to be deferred. So that's my motion.
I'd like to speak to that.
Wait a minute. Let's do the right thing. Let's get a motion on the floor and then decide whether or not we're going to vote on it. If we don't have a motion, there's nothing to discuss. So does somebody want to second the motion?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, now, Mr. Mara, you'd like to comment?
Is it the motion to delay it for one meeting? Is that correct, Daniel? Okay. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, Matt, I hear what you're saying, but you can't force people to apply. And we all had an opportunity to make calls. It's been maybe, Daniel, do you recall when this was put out there? It was, or maybe Amy knows, when was the?
Amy can tell us.
Yeah.
Sure. Sorry, yeah, I have that in the staff report. Let me just look so I get the dates right.
Can I, while Amy's looking up the date, I will just remind everybody that we've all been pretty distracted with everything going on in our lives with this pandemic. So oftentimes we have to go out and we have to recruit for these positions. And many times those people that we go out and recruit are fantastic members of our committees. I just suggest that we give us time to do that.
Notice calling for applicants for this committee was published in the Auburn Journal on March 18th. They had until April 3rd to apply.
Okay, we heard a second, correct? Any other comments from council members?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment, please.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
I just want to clarify that I don't have any objections to the applicants. They look like a great bunch of applicants. I didn't have any problem picking 5. It's just that I'm concerned about the terms. I'm concerned about, are we going to have them specific to business, specific to health, specific to teaching, whatever? And what are, and how are we going to form this, like Daniel said, chartered this committee? There's no way we can do that right now tonight. And by the way, Amy, are they all citizens of Auburn? Every one of these people?
They are.
Everybody lives in
double-checked
City Limits.
Double-checked address is correct.
Yeah.
I did have to remove
Okay, good.
home addresses for privacy reasons, but they are all
Of course. Yeah.
city
All
limits.
right.
of
Thank
Auburn.
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr.
Any
Mayor.
other council member comments?
I want to say one more thing. And,
Go ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say one more thing. I don't know exactly where we're coming from in terms of, we had a very long discussion when the room was full of people, and we came to a consensus and we established our guidelines. We put it out there and we got applicants, and we got a sufficient amount of applicants. So, I every time someone calls, we turn things around and start over. I don't know. Or are we starting over? I think we had an opportunity to call since the last meeting and tell people to apply. So it wasn't since March. We could have called way before the pandemic. Our meeting was, if I recall, probably January or maybe December meeting. And, you know, we don't, you know, again, this is a group of people who have no financial stake. They're, a lot of them are retired, they have time. So I mean, I spent a lot of time going through each application. I think it's an important committee to set up and you know, again, we established what I thought was as a guideline and now we, you know, want to call people. So that's something we should consider, but anyway.
Any other council member comments?
I just want to tell Sandy that the meeting was February 24th. The 3.5-hour meeting was February 24th.
Any
not
other
December or
comments?
January.
Yeah, you know, if I could, I'll just add, I think that pushing this back 2 weeks is not detrimental. I don't think that there is an emergency in doing this. And I think just the charter itself to be consistent with our other committees and make sure that we've pre-established in motion, you know, what slots are for what time frame and whether or not there's just 5 at-large members or by category. I think that can be cleaned up in a relatively quick amount of time and brought back so that we're making a good decision. And I think that 2 weeks, anything major is going to happen that can't happen in 2 weeks from now.
All right, anything else before I comment? The idea of the major stakeholder groups, everybody in town knew this committee existed. There were a lot of comments about it and they could have applied. The committees that we have that work the best are all volunteer, people that choose to be on the committees. We have a couple of committees where people are assigned and many times they don't show up or participate in their meetings. Their subcommittees don't meet. I think it's a serious mistake to suggest that if we try to coerce people into being on this that didn't know about it and want to volunteer, we're going to get a better group. I don't think we're going to get a better group. As far as the other procedural issues about it, they could have come up sooner. I have no objection to reviewing them, but they could have come up sooner. I think it's not appropriate. Well, any committee at any time, the city council can review their charter and what they're doing. But we've already done that with this committee and these people had every expectation they would be appointed tonight. I don't see any reason to delay. I agree with that. So my vote will be to continue to appoint the people tonight and we can revise the committee down the road as we choose. At any time, the city council can make that revision. But I think the people that have applied in good faith and spent a lot of time with their applications and the 200, almost 150 plus people that were here at the meeting expect this committee to be at least formed. And I think we have an obligation to go ahead and do it tonight because that's what we told them. And there's been plenty of time for all of us to bring up the concerns we're voicing now. So with that said, any other comments before we call the question? All right, we'll call the question then, please.
Okay, I'm just going to clarify that the motion on the table is to delay the item number 8 for 2 weeks until the April 27th meeting. So I'll now take vote. Councilmember Mackey,
Aye.
Amara,
No.
Berlant,
Aye.
Spokley,
Aye.
and Mayor Kirby.
No. Okay, that motion then passed and it will be put off until the 27th of April for the meeting. Now, procedural question, I'm not sure what we're putting off because nobody really defined what they wanted to come back. So if anybody wants to add, to give staff what they'd like to see come back at this time, I think that would probably be a good suggestion. Anybody on the council want to make that a comment to staff about what they would like to see come back? Or are we just going to try to get more applicants in the next 2 weeks?
Mayor Kirby, I don't necessarily want more applicants. I want more clarity as to what type of seat each one of these are going to hold. I thought we were going to have an at-large business person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we all just pick somebody, then are we just going to put them in that seat? Or, you know, we might be missing a segment of the community that we want to include. So I think we need to go back over. And I think our city manager had given us some suggestions in that respect, and we talked about it. And then And then also, are they just going to serve a year? That's what I heard Matt say. So I didn't realize that. I thought they're going to be 2-year terms, alternating 2-year terms. That's something else that hasn't been clarified for us. And of course, city residency and all that. So we need some sort of details.
So it
In my
appears the
opinion.
suggestion is that we bring this back for discussion of the format of the committee. Is that what I'm getting?
Correct.
Daniel Berlin?
Yeah, no, I agree. My understanding, I thought, was that the 5 people would not be at-large representatives, but representatives of various stakeholder groups for this.
Just to clarify, we did discuss that each city council member would have a pick from the applicant pool. So it appears that we're giving direction to staff and that we would like to bring this motion back to discuss the formation of the committee or the framework of the committee. Is that correct?
I think the framework is the perfect word to use. It's not, from my perspective, and my vote wasn't the applicant, was not the pool, wasn't the intent. It was just the framework of the committee.
Does staff understand that? Is that your understanding, Councilmember Folkley?
Yeah, real quick, I agree that the framework isn't what I recall we talked about. The other point I wanted to make is the way that this is set up today is once we hear this and make these appointments, the entire committee expires out at the same time, which is not a very good way to run a committee. So we ought to talk also about ways that we can stagger, whether it's along with council members' terms or whatever it might be, but to have everybody term out at the same time means that we could be starting again a year down the road or 2 years down the road. It might be good for the framework to include some sort of staggering of these terms.
Does staff understand those charges?
We do, and we will be happy to come back with that at the next meeting.
All right, I think that helps.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, I just want to be clear, in the resolution, staff did put varying term limits. So
I thought they did.
in the staff report, actually every single one of them is a different date and not just, and a different year. So there are, I think we already have the time frame piece of it. I really think it's, and to be honest with you, I missed a meeting, so maybe that's my fault. But I was under the impression from that this was going to have that the committee would have categories, not just residents at large, where the resolution says everything is a resident.
All right, so the staff understands the charge. We'll bring it back for discussion April 27th. That seems to be acceptable to everybody. This isn't really a vote. I just would like the consensus if that's true. Seems like it is. Okay. That's agenda approval, correct? We've done that?
Correct.
Have we approved the agenda or did we just remove one item yet?
You removed item 8. If by consensus of the council, you could approve the remainder of the agenda.
Can we approve the remainder of the agenda minus item 8?
I move we approve the remainder of the agenda minus item 8.
All those
All
in
in
favor?
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless persons request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for discussion and or separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Do I hear a motion?
Can I remove item number 5, please?
Item number 5, which is Vienna Woods
Vienna
subdivision
Woods.
acceptance.
Yeah, I just had a short
All
comment.
right. Any other items? Can I hear a motion?
I'll
I
move
move
to approve
approval.
the agenda minus item number 5.
Second.
All right. We'll have a roll call vote on that motion.
Councilmember Mackey,
Aye.
Amara,
Aye.
Berlant,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
Mayor Kirby.
Aye. Councilmember Berlant, would you like to discuss item 5?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, real quick, I just wanted to procedurally bring up item number 5 and state that I will be voting for it, where in the past I have recused myself from this project as I previously owned land within the proximity to the project itself. I have since moved, and so I do not have a conflict. So I just wanted to put it on the record that I'll be now voting on this item. And you're on mute, but I will, unless there's other comments, make a motion that we approve item number 5.
All right, go ahead. Second.
Second,
All right, roll call vote on item number 5.
Councilmember Mackey,
aye.
Amara,
Aye.
Berlant,
Aye.
Spokely,
Yes.
Mayor Kirby.
Aye. Okay, we're done with the consent calendar. Public comment. This is a time provided so that the public may speak to the council on any item not on this agenda. Please make your comments as brief as possible. The council cannot act on items not included on this agenda. However, the items will be automatically referred to staff. Please speak your name, spell your name, provide your address if you desire. Council members shall have the option to speak for 30 seconds on any item not on this agenda. Council members, anybody wish to? Am I hearing nobody? Shake your heads. Okay. I have one public comment that I'm going to make. I've been shopping in Auburn recently quite a bit, and nobody, or at least half the people in the stores, not nobody, are not wearing any kind of face coverage. This is really inappropriate, and we need to encourage our citizens in the surrounding area to, when they go and shop, not necessarily when you're hiking or out walking by yourself when you're 6 feet away, but certainly if you're going to a store or shop like I've been lately, to wear some kind of face coverage. CDC has said it can be a bandana, it can be cloth. This happens to be one I got from the hospital today. They can be almost anything. They don't prevent the virus from going through the mask. They don't prevent the virus from coming into the mask. What they do is stop droplets. So if you cough or sneeze, a viral load will not go out that will affect somebody nearby if you happen to have the virus. We're seeing a higher penetration of the virus in the surrounding communities, and I think it's critical that we encourage our citizens to wear these masks, okay, of any kind. And that bandana, I wouldn't want to be in a stagecoach with you, Sandy, but that sure works. So anything works. Many people are, and Councilmember Berlant, that looks quite good. Chief, that also. Any kind of a face covering is very, very helpful, and we should encourage our citizens to use it. I was also somewhat appalled that none of the clerks in the stores were wearing masks, and we should ask to talk to them about that. I did talk to one store manager. They all seem to have plexiglass, so I guess we all should have bought shares of plexiglass. Plexiglass probably should have been used before. Anyway, please encourage our citizens to wear some kind of face coverings. Thank you very much. That's my comment. Now we'll go to public comment.
Thank you. I'm going to take it from here. I'm going to address public comment first, and then I'll be sharing my screen to show public comment received before the meeting. After that is over, I will be checking my inbox. Any emails that specify they are for public comment for this meeting will then be read. So public comment looks different tonight. We have never held a meeting completely online before and are learning best practices as we go. Staff has put a lot of time into formatting public comment in a way that is fair and reasonable, given the situation. That being said, the following is public comment received for items not included on this agenda. Due to the volume of comments, we are sharing each comment for a sufficient amount of time for it to be read by the viewers and the council. Written public comments received prior to the meeting have been provided directly to all of the city council, and they have had an opportunity to read all of your comments in full. Voicemail messages containing public comments specifically were also accepted and will be played during this time. All of the public comments are part of the permanent record and will be available for inspection after the meeting. This is the beginning of the public comment. You'll see the written public comments first, and then we'll go into the audio comments a little bit later. Council, if you
Approximately
want-
how many are we looking at? Just for curiosity.
Sure, just to prepare you, we have about 40 written public comments and about 10 audio. The
Thank you.
audios are all fairly short, and we will keep the written ones up for about 30 to 45 seconds, depending on length.
Thank you.
And council, if you need to be able to, if you need to close out of the screen on the right to view the entire public comment, you may. This is an audio message.
Hey, City Council people, this is Sally, the Butt Lady of Auburn, and hope all is going well with you guys, and I'm still doing my walking around, trying to keep Auburn beautiful, no thanks to the idiot smokers out there. And I am now, as of today, 1,647,834 poisonous cigarette butts that won't be eaten by any animals. So have a good rest of the meeting, and one of these days I'll be able to see you guys again. Alrighty. Bye-bye.
Now, I have a couple audio files.
Good morning. My name is Robert Wallace. I am a 60-year resident, well, will be as of October, resident of Auburn, California, and I am calling regarding the Bill Kirby, our illustrious.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah, Mayor Kirby removed.
Good morning. My name is Robert Wallace. I am a 60-year resident, well, will be as of October, resident of Auburn, California, and I am calling regarding the Bill Kirby, our illustrious mayor who has wished death upon people. Being a doctor, the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm, and he's wishing death on people because they have a different political belief. I've had run-ins with Bill before on Facebook on his political beliefs and wishing the worst on people. This is completely unacceptable. I grew up here and I have never seen anything or heard anything like this from any of our elected officials. This man needs to be removed from office because it is obvious that he has lost his sensibilities for fairness and completely forgotten his Hippocratic Oath. Everything that he has done in this community will now be remembered by what he has done here. And it is disgusting, sickening, and this man needs to resign or be impeached and removed from office, if that is a possibility. Regardless, he will be voted out in November, but he needs to shut his trap, do his job until he is out of office. And that means being non-political and wishing death upon people who believe differently than he does. And if you have any questions,
Hi, Amy. This is Lori Peltz-Lewis.
Sorry. Like I said, we're learning.
Hi, Amy. This is Lori Peltz-Lewis. My husband, Ralph Lewis, and I live in Auburn, and I wanted to express my support for Bill Kirby and the issues that he's going through. We're in agreement that there is a problem with the way that the coronavirus pandemic is being handled, and we wanted to express our support for Bill Kirby, and if there's anything that we can do to help support him further, we'd be more than happy to do so. The home phone is 53.
Yes, my name is Dr. Chris Van Overen, and I just wanted to call in support of Dr. Kirby. I completely 100% agree with his assessment of the president and his callous disregard for public safety and his way of reacting to this crisis, I believe, did put us all into jeopardy and contributed to the current crisis. Wanted that to be on record for Monday night's meeting. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
This voicemail is to be considered for public commentary. My name is Miss Donahue, and I am a resident of Auburn. I formally request that I'm requesting a vote be taken tonight to schedule a special session meeting to have Mayor Kirby removed from the mayoral seat immediately for reasons that I have not had time to fully embrace yet, not the least of which is the KKK post or wishing death to Kavanaugh or death to Scalia or death to other people. My name is Kiara. Please have this recorded.
Yes, I understand this is the number to call to leave a comment on your Auburn mayor, or at least the one who claims to be acting like a Mayor Kirby. Is just to simply say I understand he wishes and sees that he wishes Trump supporters die. I can only suggest to you and to the city council that you get rid of this person very quickly. If not, my only hope is that COVID-19 catches up with him. But even if it doesn't, it won't matter because he is old enough, deranged enough. He is clearly demented.
and he clearly has Alzheimer's. Can only hope that that he loses his job or is not around to have his job. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lisa Beers. I am a resident of Forest Hill and frequent Auburn often, have lived there as well. I am calling to comment on the mayor's situation that has arisen from his Facebook. I believe that I think most of us were in shock over that as being a public figure in office of Auburn. I think that was really bad because it has hit a lot of people that are Trump supporters, and this, I can't even explain how much stuff is on there that is inappropriate, as does, I think, make a difference of his job. I don't care if it's a private thing, but if you're a public figure like that, that's like if the police officers were posting stuff like that, it would be inappropriate. That is something he should have kept to himself. I just wanted to call and say that I am representing many people that feel that up here in Forest Hill. It is extremely disappointing, and I believe that he should be removed, being that if he is not, what is that saying? That we approve what he's doing, because we do not. Thank you for your time. My name
Hi there. As a citizen with a family history going back 100 years in Auburn, I would like to register my concern and outrage at the hideous and unacceptable online commentary by Mayor and physician Bill Kirby. Bill accepts no responsibility for his behavior and demonstrates a woeful ignorance of how social media works when his own company fires employees for stupid things they say on social media. These comments are hateful, degrading, bigoted, and more consistent with the mentality of a 15-year-old. Bill's lack of reasonable judgment and caveman understanding of social media disqualifies him from any position of leadership. Would you please take steps to remove this narcissist from any position of authority within the city of Auburn? He is beneath a town I've loved all of my life. My name is Jeremy Van Wert. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Andrew, and this message is in regards to the mayor's conduct on public forums. Esteemed council members and Bill, I do not approve of the mayor's actions and his hateful, belittling speech towards those across the aisle. I understand that Bill has been aspiring to a position of power for years now, from president of Little League to councilman to mayor. These aspirations make sense because his profession has made him realize he's inadequate in other areas. When one spends their career seeing constant evidence of one's own inadequacy, it can turn them into the very thing they worry about the most. It appears that may be what has happened here, though I'm no doctor. On the other hand, I've heard Bill isn't much of one either. First, I urge the mayor to step down and resign, and if that doesn't work, I ask that the council censor him, and if possible, remove him. If that does not work, I'm confident he'll be voted out by the good people of Auburn in November. Thank you, and God bless America.
I'd like to leave a voicemail for the city council meeting tonight that I'd like to be entered into the record. My name is Chris Farina. I was born in Auburn, California. Actually, my children are sixth generation to live in the same property in Auburn, California. My family homesteaded here in 1857. As far as Dr. Kirby's remarks, I'm totally disgusted. This is beyond politics. To wish death upon half your constituents, the President, Vice President, and Supreme Court of the United States is totally unacceptable. You are not worthy to be on the city council, let alone mayor. You should not be a physician. And as a former football player at Placer High School, you're not fit to be the coach physician. You should immediately apologize and resign. I don't realize how you've woken a sleeping giant, especially now when we're at home and focused on issues at hand. This will not be the last of it. If you have the audacity to stay on the city council, you will hear from all of us. Thank you for your time.
Hi, this is a message for tonight for public review for tonight's meeting. My name is Dan Cioni. I am a Meta Vista. I live in Meta Vista. I'm calling in regards to the mayor's comments. While he likes to say that his page is not public, anything that's out in social media is actually public. And I fear that this sort of thing is for a person of power, a city employee, is just not the right sort of things to say. There's been a lot of comments out there that have supposedly he said. The main thing that I'm concerned about is what he said to me. When I questioned him about his KKK picture, it wasn't so much that I was offended by that, because everybody puts memes out there. Everybody puts out both right and left, and there's so much hatred for both sides. But when I questioned him about that particular meme, I quote, he said, "F off, you right-wing nutcase." And again, he said to me, "Your page and your support for Trump proves my point. You're an un-American Nazi clown." These to me offend me more than anything. For any person to talk to me like that, especially a mayor of a city, I won't say what should happen, but I think that he needs to resign. This is absolutely horrible for a person to speak like this to anybody, especially in a small town that is mostly Trump supporters. I think that he needs to step down. I want a public apology. I also feel that the city of Auburn will probably take a big step forward in making sure he's removed from office by either a recall. And if we have to get every single council member to get to him, we will vote every single one of them out. Thank you for your time. Please address the situation. It needs to stop.
Okay, so that is all I have for public comment that was received before the meeting. If you could give me probably about 20 seconds, I need to pull any any emails that were received up to this point during this meeting, if they are a general comment, and then I will put those on my desktop and open those emails as well, so that those
In the meantime, I could probably make my public comment now. I was going to save it till we were done completely, but I'd like to make a public comment.
Perfect.
Is that all right, Mr. Mayor? I'd like to personally apologize to the citizens of Auburn. This city council has let Kirby rant on Facebook far too long. And we know it, we understand it, at least I understand it. We asked Dr. Kirby to stop his postings a few months ago. He promised he would, and he did not. It sickens me, the things that he says. And if I can't say it in public, then I should be ashamed of myself, because that makes me aligned with him, and I am not aligned with him. I would never wish death on another person, no matter what, no matter what. So in order to stop the roar and the firestorm, I am certainly hoping that Dr. Kirby will agree to step down from the city council and leave, so we can get on with the city's business. If not, I'm hoping that a city council member will join me in censuring Dr. Kirby. It would have to go on the meeting, the next agenda, to censure Dr. Kirby at very least, so that the people in the community recognize that we as a city council do not think the things that Dr. Kirby thinks. I'm appealing to my council members for this help. If not, I've gotten my statement out there, and this is how I feel. I abhor the things that he has said and done. And I did not hear an apology from him tonight, and I felt like he should have apologized. Thank you.
Okay.
I believe the mayor is trying to speak, but he's still muted.
What did you say, Gary?
Your microphone microphone was muted for your last comment,
Oh.
and so I'm not anymore if you want to say it again.
Are there any other council member comments before Amy puts up the, whatever she has?
Yeah, if I could make a comment, Mr. Mayor. Okay. So,
Certainly, go
yeah,
ahead.
I've had an opportunity, obviously, to talk with you about my feelings. We've all been bombarded with emails and calls, and this issue is definitely turning into a partisan discussion. And I think it's really very unfortunate that it is taking focus and time, not just from the council, but also our city staff during an emergency. We need to be focused right now, and our staff needs to be focused on the response to COVID and the recovery to COVID. I just want to reiterate and thank you for beginning the transition so that we can, at the next meeting, vote another council member as the mayor so that we can move forward with the response and recovery to COVID. I want to just publicly acknowledge your comments, and I hope to see your nomination in a couple of weeks. I too, though, am very saddened and disappointed with the line that was crossed in many of those comments, wishing death upon anybody, whether it be an adversary, whether it be deserved or not, from a city council member, an elected official, to me is unacceptable. And so I do as well echo Councilmember Mackey's request that you at least provide us a public apology. I think you provided a very good, informative background of why you thought those were private. I do think you owe the community an apology, not to apologize to say if you felt what you said was wrong, but I think to take away from where the focus needs to be right now. And again, that is just ensuring that our community is safe, that our businesses are able to recover after this. So I'm hoping that in 2 weeks, the council can make a transition and we can continue to focus where we need to focus. So thank you for the time, Mr. Mayor.
I will talk to you later to get some sense of what you exactly would like. I've said so, my comments were over the top, and I regret that. You and I can have a conversation about what you think is appropriate offline, so I can figure out if it's how to do it the best possible manner that will satisfy me and you. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Amy, do you have those? Anything yet? Oh, Matt, do you want to talk?
I do. As mentioned by a few of my fellow council members, we've had the opportunity to have conversations with the mayor about his posts previously. We have all had private conversations with the mayor about these posts and our concerns and disdain for what we're seeing on the internet. I don't want to continue to pile on. I think the message is clear. We are not in agreement with what you're posting on the internet. You say they're private, Mr. Mayor, but they're not. You sign off many of your posts on your private webpage as Mayor Kirby, which blurs the lines for me, as I told you the other day on the phone. And now, you got to reap what you sow. So I wish you the best. I hope that you do the right thing here. But our citizens of Auburn deserve better. And I'm not saying you haven't been a good steward and a good community member, but you have crossed so many lines. It's astounding to me. And we need to figure out how to move forward. In the middle of a pandemic, we've got a lot of other city issues going on. We are now in a position where we've got to deal with this. And I don't know about my fellow council members, but I spent the last 3 or 4 days dealing with correspondence and responses. And frankly, we've got other things that are more important to us to focus on, such as our businesses that are shuttered right now. And God forbid, we lose half or a third of them at the back end of this COVID-19 thing. But we've wasted a lot of time on this bill. So for that, I'm unhappy.
And to agree with a lot of what you said, Matt. Any other comments before Amy puts her stuff up?
Yes, I would like to make a comment.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Yes, I agree with what Councilman Spokley and Councilman Berlant says in terms of this has detracted from the business of our city. And I don't condone at all what you've said. And as the councilmen and women have alluded to, we've had discussions, and this has continued. But at this point, it ramped up, and now it became serious. So the citizens spoke. I think Mayor Kirby also spoke. He accepted an apology. He gave an apology. Was it sufficient? It sounds like he wants to make it better in that regard. However, more importantly, the timeline that he proposed is a timeline that helps us move on. And that should end it. And I think we do need to end this. We need to move on and conduct our city business. We all have been very clear. And anyone that tries to say that we condone it are wrong. No one condones it. Mayor Kirby indicated that he regrets it, and an apology is forthcoming. The timeline I'm happy with, and so I want to get on with city business. We have a lot of business at hand, and as we indicated, businesses are closed. The coronavirus is an issue. We have a new city manager we're hiring, so we need to move on. And I think this should end it tonight. Thank
Any
you.
other comments before Amy puts up her last? Okay, Amy, do you have any other things to put up?
I had received one email because it was indicated on the city council agenda that you must put in the subject line public comment so that we can easily determine what is meant as public comment and what is just general correspondence to the city council. I have one received during this meeting that had public comment in the title. You can see my screen, correct?
Yes, we can, Amy.
It is only this one.
Yes.
I'll put it up for 30 seconds and then I will be done with public comment. Okay, that concludes public comment.
All right, we're going to move on to item 9 in just 1 minute, but I'm going to take a 5-minute break, please.
Just in case anyone recently tuned in, we're on a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Has 5 minutes gone by, Amy?
I believe so.
I believe Sandy's not back yet, so we'll wait a minute. There we are. Is everybody ready to go?
Yes.
All right, fiscal year 2019-20 mid-year financial status report. I believe this is Mr. Heath, correct, Andy?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, I'm gonna take just a sec to share my screen, so bear with me a minute. Let's go. There we go. All right, everybody got that okay?
Yes, looks good on this end.
Okay, great. All right, we'll get started then. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Andy Heath, the city's finance director. What I'd like to do for you tonight is give you an update on the mid-year financial status as it sits for the current fiscal year 19-20, of which we have about 3 months left. As part of tonight's discussion, we'll go over the budget review process, which is similar to what it's been pretty much every year in the past. With the exception of a new element that's been added as part of the review, where you can see COVID-19 fiscal issues. So we'll talk a little bit about that and really focus on the uncertainty that the COVID-19 pandemic is bringing on the city finances. Some of the things we're looking at to at least help mitigate some of that uncertainty. But again, until we get a lot more data, we're really guessing where things may end up for this fiscal year and more importantly next year as we develop the budget. Then I'll go through the budget update and forecast for the city's general fund, which is the main operating fund that houses most of the discretionary activities for the city. We'll look at 3 other special revenue funds that are playing particularly important this year, which would be the gas tax fund, the transportation fund, and the special fire fund. And then we'll go through one slide on the fiscal year 2021 budget development, which starts about 3 months from now in July. Looking at the mid-year financial status report, some of the things that we look at from year to year is making sure that we're looking at the fiscal activity to date, consistent with city council directives and goals and some of the things your city council has put forward for the budget year, focusing on health and safety. Critical staffing needs is addressed to make sure that we have critical staffing needs. Cost recovery is another area where if we can recover costs, and you'll see that there are a lot of updates to the general fund, particularly that have to do with cost recovery in the area of grants. So there's been a lot of grants that have been procured by the city this year that we're adding to the budget on both sides. So we'll talk about that. Project delivery, and then anywhere where we can improve service and efficiency, we obviously want to take a look at that and find out what it takes. Looking at some of the things that we are considering as part of the COVID-19 pandemic and the impacts that it's having on the city of Auburn moving forward. We have national, statewide, and local economic shutdown. So we're all aware that there are so many businesses, even our own community, around the state, nationwide, that are simply not providing any services whatsoever defined as non-essential services. How long this goes on for remains to be seen. Each state's gonna have their own turn back on day, presumably, but we don't even know that. So as long as our businesses are shut down, there is a significant impact to the city on the level of sales tax that we're collecting, the level of TOT tax that we're collecting, and potentially a lot of other types of things and revenues that we receive as well, and we'll go over those. State unemployment claims. So over the last 3 reporting periods, there have been 1.9 million unemployment claims in the state of California total. That's quite a bit. We have the evolution and potentially the de-evolution of social distancing and really what that looks like. Obviously, we are practicing social distancing right now, and we've evolved well as a culture into that around this community, in the state and in the nation and in the world, frankly. But the psychology and the behavior modifications associated with what it means to come out of social distancing and what the de-evolution of social distancing look like remains to be seen, particularly on areas where this city generates revenues related to people that get together in a restaurant, in a hotel, at an event, where there's an event in town like the Tevis Cup or another race, or people coming to town in the summer to hang out at the Confluence. All those people come into town, they park in the same areas, and they use our restaurants, they congregate in town. And ultimately, what does it look like in their own psychology, in their personal psychology? What are they going to change in their behavior that may ultimately impact the way we receive revenue as a city? And we're thinking about all these things because I'm pretty sure it's not going to look what it looked like in January or February before the COVID crisis really came down hard. Oil market impacts, okay, as everyone knows that's on this call, our biggest sales taxpayer is an oil provider. And right now you've got a huge glut of supply in oil worldwide that has recently been reduced through the OPEC Plus by 10 million, almost 10 million barrels a day. But that's not really having any impact on the price at all. The price of oil at the end of the day today was between $22 and $23 a barrel. Just 6 weeks ago, the price of oil was between $50 and $60 a barrel. Okay, so oil is a third the price that it was kind of before all of this began. We also have very low demand. As people are not able to go out and do the things that they typically do, travel, et cetera, the demand for oil and gas is very low. High supply and low demand does not play well for the sales tax on gas and the city's collections of that. You have fiscal stimulus mechanisms. One of those fiscal stimulus mechanisms is the sales tax deferrals, for example, where the state of California is considering providing small businesses as defined, 5 million and less, with an up to $50,000 sales tax deferral for up to a year. Okay, well that's good because it puts cash back into the small businesses' pockets that they can just pay back later without any significant penalties or interest. But what that does is it prevents that cash from coming to the cities and any benefactor of sales tax, the state themselves and other districts, for the services that we provide. So not having those taxes available could be considerable for this city. And then finally, the ultimate fiscal magnitude and the length of the recovery is unknown. We have to have ongoing data, and we need to review that and disseminate it amongst everybody on this call, particularly the City Council, to make sure you understand as we receive this data exactly what we're looking at and some of the things that are coming down. As you might recall, back in 2008, when this city did go through the process of a recession, at that time, the information was changing so quickly that it was very difficult to put forward budget information. It was very difficult to update given the complexity and the magnitude of the changes that were coming down related to the fiscal crisis back in 2008, that we tried to stay ahead of that. And that's our goal this time too, is to really make sure you have the information you need to take the recommendations that ultimately will be coming before your council and ultimately make a decision on how we proceed moving forward. What you'll see with this budget update that I'm going to go through is that it's kind of bittersweet because there were some things that were going on prior to the COVID-19 impacts that actually started impacting our budget that were really having a boon on our economy, on our local economy. And absent COVID, you would have had a fiscal budget update that would have put a lot more money into the coffers for the rest of this fiscal year and more than likely next fiscal year as well. So this is the general fund, and I'm going to focus on the general fund. You can see your adopted budget was essentially a balanced budget. We were going to put about $7,000, $6,000 back in the bank with $12.3 million in revenues and $12.3 million in expenditures. You can see the estimated amounts are each about $1 million higher. So I have $1 million more in revenue coming in and also about $983,000 more in expenditures being added to the appropriation schedule for the general fund. Ultimately, the resulting impact is adding another $69,000 to fund balance. I will put a caveat on this though, because a lot of this, and you'll see what assumptions we've built in for COVID-19, a lot of this is dependent on exactly what transpires. It's my goal to make sure your council is updated as often as possible to the point where maybe even every other council meeting in the short term, just to give you an update on any new information we might be hearing that may impact this budget. And then ultimately maybe even change this budget as we recommend it moving forward as more information comes out. Looking at some of the revenue changes that we're bringing forward, again, just over $1 million in additional revenue to the city's general fund. You can see that I've added a little bit more in property taxes in lieu, and this is just for the VLF money that we get as a property tax now, and truing up compared to the actual amount in assessed valuation increase that we experienced for the current fiscal year. Sales taxes, I'm actually increasing by $455,000. What I want to mention is that absent COVID, we would have adjusted sales tax upwards by about $1 million, okay? And that $1 million was going to come from fuel sales because prior to COVID, fuel sales were going through the roof. We were having quarter after quarter of record returns in sales tax from Nella Oil, our largest sales taxpayer. And the price of gas was $3.50 to $3.75 a gallon. And there was no waning demand whatsoever. The demand for gas was very high. We also had Miltenyi Biotech that was having good sales of their equipment. And then also a lot of other areas and sectors in our sales tax rate mix were producing a lot of funds as well. The final thing that actually added a lot of sales tax also was the results of the Wayfair decision, where the Wayfair decision essentially required anybody doing internet sales in the state of California to pay a sales tax to a county pool. So anybody that is selling anything over the internet in the state of California, in Placer County, in the city of Auburn, anywhere in Placer County, has to pay that sales tax. And that sales tax is then pooled and then it's distributed based on our share of the pool, which is essentially our share of all sales tax that we collect in Auburn compared to Placer County as a whole. That was going to add between $200,000 and $300,000 in sales tax for this year and likely next year as well. So that's a big plus. Transient occupancy, yes, Mr. Spokely.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Andy. I
Okay.
tried to raise my hand, but anyway. So not only those decreases that you're talking about in sales tax based on all that's going on with the COVID situation, but we also have some executive orders that are impacting us as well. Are you going to touch on those? Am I asking too soon?
Yes, yeah, I'm trying to follow that. I mean, this information comes out hourly, and I'm trying to keep really in tune with exactly how any one of our revenue sources may be impacted in the city, and then adjust these budgets accordingly.
Okay, I don't want to further disrupt your presentation, but at some point I want to hear what our plan is for the executive order that defers businesses from filing sales tax for, I think it's up to 3 months, but I'll let you continue on.
Yeah, can we, that's a good point, Matt, but can we hold the questions until he finishes? I think it'd be less disruptive because too many people might try to jump in at the same time in this forum. It's harder to manage. Thank you.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just going back to sales tax real quick. So yeah, we were going to add over $1 million in sales tax back to the budget in addition to the budget. But because of the way we receive sales tax and because of the likelihood that the fourth quarter for sales tax, particularly as it relates to fuel, will be very, very low. And other areas, restaurants, consumer goods, those sorts of things, a lot of our shops are shut down, downtown, Old Town, and even in the city proper. We're going to see what we've estimated about $745,000 drop in sales tax for the current fiscal year. So when you combine that with the 1.15 million, that's where you see the increase in sales tax for 455. Again, we'll be watching this very, very closely. I am working with our sales tax consultant, which is HDL, that does sales tax consulting for the majority of the cities around the state of California. And they have agreed to work with me to update our 3-year forecast specific to the city of Auburn and get that to me this week. So I'm going to see really how their updated forecast compares to some of the things we put together by sector. And then if there are big changes that result from that, we'll come back to you and let you know what those look like. Transient occupancy taxes, a little bit less than that, obviously. The hotels aren't being used to the extent that they were. They were already down just a little bit, so it's going to adjust it downward by about 20,000. Keeping in mind that we make about just over 300,000 in transient occupancy tax, but because of COVID, I adjusted that downward even more. So 62,500 total for that. We have a new tobacco retailer fee. This came into place during the fiscal year, and we are collecting those. So $8,500 there is coming in, previously unbudgeted. Building activity was waning just a little bit. We were still doing pretty well from a development perspective. Not so much over the last 6 weeks or so, but just a slight reduction in building activity leads to a reduction in building permits by 20. Interest earnings before 6 weeks ago, rates were higher, not so much anymore. But with the earnings that we have for the first 9 months of the fiscal year, I can comfortably raise those interest earnings in the general fund by $7,500. We have law enforcement and fire protection grants for another $153,000. These are one-time grants. We have a tobacco grant and a human trafficking grant in the police department. Also a DHS grant and a RAN grant. So all of those are police related, about $153,000. This is one-time money that's coming in. And what you'll see is an appropriation being established in the police department as well to spend this money. So this is one-time money on the revenue side and on the expenditure side. We have equipment grants, and this is just put into the fire department for $199,250. And this is the PSPS grant that we received for the purchase of generators and the such to alleviate and mitigate the impacts of future PSPSs on the city of Auburn as we move forward. So we have that money to spend as well. Fire field break grant, there's $130,000 coming into the general fund, again, for an increased expenditure on the fire side for $130,000 there. Post-training reimbursements. This is police officer standards and training for $9,246. These are reimbursements for training costs incurred by the police department. So this is an offsetting reimbursement. Plan check fees. This is to date. So we have received a lot more than is anticipated in the budget. So I can move that up by 35,000. And then we have some other miscellaneous revenues there, about just over 35,000 as well. Things for the Arts Commission. The Arts Commission does a great job bringing revenue that they generate into the city with their music and street program and other programs that they have. So they have brought some funds in to help offset some of the costs they've incurred as part of their commission budget. And then we have some Auburn Police Department donations. Some of the pink patches and the other things that they're selling are in that number. And then some surplus property. The last $30,000 number is just a sum of everything else. It's a lot of little stuff combined, but in totality, revenues in the general fund are expected to increase by just over $1 million. Again, with the caveat that there are significant COVID impacts built into this revenue budget that we will be monitoring very, very closely. On the appropriation side, just under $1 million is recommended to be added in appropriations. Just over 20,000 for the city manager's office. We have updated salary and benefit costs there. And then some labor relations as well. And this is for Patrick Clark, working with our unions and negotiating. We had a lot of that going on this year. Economic development, reducing that budget by just under $50,000. And the bullet there underneath economic development isn't correct. And what it should say is we have some vacancy savings where the economic development director position has been vacant for a while. So you have the savings incurred on that. And then that's offset by the recent hiring of a consultant to assist with the sales tax measure and some of the work being done on the polling there. So the net of economic development is a reduction in that budget by about $50,000. So a savings there. Police department up by about $181,000. And we moved, you may recall, and remember that we did move the code enforcement position, Jennifer Solomon's position, from the planning department over to the police department. So that budget has to move, and we're increasing the police department's budget for that. We also have some increased overtime in the police department. And then we have all of the grant appropriations that I mentioned a little bit earlier that are being added as well. So 181,000 there. Fire department, similarly, we have some overtime there. We also have some increased vehicle maintenance costs. Got to make sure the equipment is in working order. Some minor equipment purchases. And then again, like the police department, we have the grant appropriations, particularly for the PSPS grant and the fuel reduction, which are combined over $325,000 together. So you can see the majority of their $450,000 increase is related to those one-time grants that need to be appropriated for expenditure. Administrative services and finance, 47,000 and change increase there. There is some salary savings that's reducing the budget. We have a position vacancy for the first part of the year that was since filled. But we also have increased recruitment costs. A lot of the costs associated with the additional firefighters and other positions in the city are borne by the HR budget in the administrative services department. We have citywide backgrounds. And then there were a couple of reports that we needed to have done this year for our audit related to our OPEB and our PERS reporting under GASB rules. So those costs are added in there as well. Planning budget up by 15,000. And this accounts for a reduction in the budget related to moving the code enforcement individual over to the police department, but that's offset by the increased use of a planning consultant, which is DUDEC, and using them a little bit more. Building inspection up by about 72,000. And again, there are some reduced costs related to staff attrition. There's a new staff member in the building area that is making a little bit less just because we retired someone that was making a little bit more. But on the increased side, we have the increased use of inspection consultants, which is Coastland Engineering, to assist with some of the things going on in building inspection. You may recall that the chief building official was actually out for some time, and we needed to get the work done. So Coastland was actually able to assist with that. In Public Works, minor change to the budget, up by about just under $19,000. It's going up because we do have lower capital transfers. So one of the things that we do with the Public Works budget is we anticipate how much of the Public Works salaries will actually be charged out to capital projects in the airport and at the sewer primarily. And now also this year with the Nevada Street project, sidewalk project out in the transportation fund. But those capital transfers, to the extent that they're made, are reduced general fund costs, okay? We're not transferring as much as originally budgeted, so that's going to increase the cost a little bit with the mid-year adjustments. We also have staff attrition with reduced costs and some leave balance payoffs that offset that. And then there was an installation of a fence at the School Park Preserve, which was an added cost, LED lights in Central Square, and additional tree maintenance. And then we finally have an offset reduced related to a reduction in anticipated field costs for the obvious reason. City attorney, another $100,000 there, increased unanticipated legal costs that weren't originally budgeted at the beginning of the year. Insurance program, additional $46,000 there. We have more workers' comp costs, liability costs, unemployment, and then there were some increased litigation contingency costs that were incurred related to the Wells Fargo building in downtown Auburn. One thing I wanted to mention about the insurance program as well is the city was in receipt just last week of next year's insurance costs through the Northern California City Self-Insurance Fund, NCCSIF, for workers' comp and liability. The City of Auburn's costs for those two programs combined are going up about $230,000 in total. So that's coming. Those costs are shared amongst other funds, but the general fund does take the majority of those costs. So that's a budgetary consideration for next year. And then you have all other appropriations for an increase of about $73,000. And within that $73,000 increase is an increase in the transfer out from the general fund to make Fund 63, which you may recall was where we were housing all of the costs associated with the additional 7 firefighters that were brought on at the outset of the fiscal year. That fund is anticipated to be short just over $100,000 by the end of the year. So the general fund will bear that cost to the tune of about $111,000. Okay, so that's all of the appropriation increases. When you take all this into consideration and you look at where we're going to finish today with our reserves, you can see there that we'll have just over $5.3 million in reserves, assuming all of this comes to fruition. Okay, those reserves represent just under 40% of our fiscal 19-20 expenditures. And keep in mind that those fiscal 19-20 expenditures include a lot of one-time activity. So when you extract that out, your budget, your reserves actually cover a larger percentage of your ongoing budget, which is a good thing. You have your economic contingency reserve intact, $2.7 million. Pension unfunded liability reserve, pension stabilization reserve, $2.2 million. Prepaid insurance costs, $260,000 in the bank for future premiums there. And then your unobligated fund balance of just over $170,000. This is the forecast for for the next 5 or 6 years. Okay, and this comes right out of the model. It updates the 2018-19 information to actual, and you can see that we actually had a deficit of about $394,000. And keep in mind that in 2018-19 we had a lot of carryover from a previous year that we actually were spending. And then we also had the true up of the NELA payments that we knew was going to drive that down a little bit. But this came in actually better than was originally budgeted with the $394,000 deficit. With this year, fiscal 19-20, we have about a $75,000 surplus. We just went over that. And you can see the ending fund balance right under that. And then you see a couple of red years in fiscal 2021 and fiscal 21-22. The fiscal 2021 budget has been updated to account for further reductions in sales tax, property tax, not property tax, just sales tax, transient occupancy tax, and one other revenue source that I'll show you in just a minute. So that essentially what we're suggesting is that we may have an $817,000 deficit next year. This $817,000 deficit assumes that we continue to include the $500,000 transfer from the general fund for street overlay. Okay, so that is built into the expenditure side of $12.9 million for fiscal 2021, and likewise all years, all the way through this forecast. I did not take that out. Okay, it includes the estimated fiscal impacts of COVID-19 for 1920 and 2021, and furthermore, it assumes that starting in 21-22 and then again in 22-23, the impacts of COVID that are all built in 1920 and 2021 are taken out. So we start to come back essentially in 21-22 and 22-23, which is why you see that $800,000 number be halved in 21-22 and then become a surplus in 22-23. This is just a forecasting technique. There's really no science to this other than forecasting that it'll take 2 years to come back after next year at the full year. And that's going to change as we get more data. So that's one thing that we'll need to update you on. That's the forecast. Here are the impacts that have actually been built in related to COVID-19. And you can see we've already gone over the 1921s. You have sales tax reduction of about $745,000, and then another reduction for TOT of $42.5, $780,000 for fiscal 1920, and then another $680,000 for next year in 2021. So another $640,000 in sales tax, $25,000 in transient occupancy tax, and then $15,000 in property transfer tax, under the assumption that that home sales will slow down and not be as hot as they were being experienced over the last couple of years. So the total aggregate reduction over the rest of this fiscal year and all of next fiscal year is estimated to be just under 1.5 million. This is the number that is this is a roll of the dice right now. It's a complete crapshoot on where we think this number is actually going to end up, and ultimately what it's going to be in the end. We will watch the data, and these numbers will change frequently, I'm afraid to say. Okay, moving away from the general fund and going into the gas tax fund. And what I tried to do was just focus on the funds that had the biggest changes. You notice that the airport fund and the sewer fund are not part of this presentation tonight. Not really a whole lot going on there. They have solid revenue bases, and the capital programs were underway. As time goes on, though, we'll bring an update back to the council on what's going on in the enterprises. But with the gas tax fund, you can see that we're estimating a little bit more revenue, 7,400, and then about 30,000 more in expenditures. The projected fund balance at the end of the year is expected to be just under $60,000 in the gas tax fund. You have higher revenues related to the updated projections that are provided by Michael Coleman in his office. He's a fiscal consultant with the League of California Cities. Generally is spot on with some of the stuff that he puts out in terms of fiscal information. However, one note I have there is because of the demand for gas dropping so much, that revenue projection is likely to be a little bit lower. So we'll be watching that on the gas tax side as well. And then we have increased expenditures related to the need for a new motor for the city sweeper, estimated to be about $30,000 there. So, and then again, you do have $1.1 million still allocated towards the overlay program, and 600,000 of that 1.1 million is coming from the gas tax fund. Transportation fund. Transportation fund recommended adjustment upward for revenues of about 151,000, increase in expenditures by 190,000. You can see that fund has a projected fund balance right now at the end of the year, assuming all these expenditures are incurred, at about 344,000. One note I want to make is that this budget in the transportation fund fully funds the Nevada Street project. Okay, and that the revenue source increase that you see there is primarily due to additional PCWA funding that's being received to help offset a portion of that project. So Nevada Street is fully funded all the way through. The increase in expenditures of $190,000 is related to an appropriation that's been estimated for anticipated costs for the Crimson Court storm drain, which is an ongoing issue and project right now. So I've added that to the budget. But at the end of the day, about $340,000 in fund balance will remain in the transportation fund. And that can be used for future overlay, can be used for unforeseen Nevada Street costs. It can be used for pretty much anything associated with transportation in the city. Finally, you see the fire equipment fund. And the fire equipment fund it used to house, strictly house just the strike team monies that we would receive on an annual basis. And then the fire department, through the city council's approval, would be able to use those strike team funds to offset typically equipment costs that otherwise would have been a burden of the general fund. With this year, what we did with the fire equipment fund was we put all the costs associated with the temporary firefighting crew that was put in place, the new 7 firefighters, and all of the non-personal related costs into this fund and into this budget. At the beginning of the year, this fund had about $250,000 in fund balance as its original revenue source. Okay, so that is the largest revenue source that you see coming in. That revenue source is going to go away. All right, because you don't have that beginning fund balance. So we are adjusting revenues downward by about $128,000. Essentially, those are just revenues that we anticipated would be received either from a strike team, from pre-positioning costs, or from other related grants or other revenues that simply did not materialize. Last year wasn't perhaps as big of a fire year as we've had in years past. And because of that, we didn't receive as much strike team revenues as we typically would have otherwise. So that's why you see that revenue adjustment downward. Expenditures going to come in pretty close to what we budgeted. And again, these are the costs for the 7 firefighters and related non-personal costs, about $12,000 less at the end of the day. What this means is that you will have an imbalance and a negative fund balance in your general in this fund of about $111,000, which will need to be covered by the general fund. So in a perfect world, we can anticipate that the ongoing costs for these firefighters will be between $700,000 and $800,000 on an ongoing basis. And we'll be looking at ways to bring that back to the council to show you different scenarios on what you may be considering for next year's budget with those costs. So that is your fire equipment fund. All right, looking at the budget development for fiscal 2021, budget and beyond, which is why we do that multi-year forecast for the general fund. Obviously, the economy and the impacts of COVID-19. I think we've talked about that quite a bit tonight and come to an understanding that we are going to have impacts in this city. We don't know to what magnitude, we don't know for how long, and we don't know when they'll recover or to what level they'll recover. We will follow this closely as we have been and stay on top of this and give you the information almost as we receive it. So stay tuned for those impacts. Rising retirement costs, CalPERS unfunded liability amortization, and now increased normal costs, which is the cost we pay for existing employees to the extent CalPERS returns are less than 7%. Okay, CalPERS had a webinar last week. In that webinar, they went over a lot of different things. They were very transparent about where they are with their portfolio to date and exactly where they think things may end up and then what the impacts might be to local jurisdictions in the future. As of last week, and keep in mind the market had a pretty good run up last week, certainly not back to the levels it was in February, but I think they had the webinar on Tuesday or Wednesday last week. They were at -4% for the first 9 months of the fiscal year. Okay, so Will they make their 7%? Probably not. But where will it end up? And ultimately, how does that impact our unfunded liability costs and our normal costs 2 years out when the actuaries are done and the liabilities are real numbers to us? We're going to have continued focus on council priorities. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of things out there. We talked about sustainability tonight. We talked about the street overlay, and we've talked about fire. A lot of those things we know are near and dear to you, and we'll be looking at those when we put the budget together as well. And then continued update of the general fund model and the forecasts, just to assure we have long-term fiscal sustainability. Again, as these COVID numbers come in, it's going to be interesting to see exactly how that impacts our model moving forward, but we will be giving you that information as well. So I think with that, I'm going to stop and answer any questions you might have.
Matt, do you have further questions you want to follow up with right now? Matt, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do, Bill. Thank you very much. So Andy, I'll start at the top. I mean, obviously overshadowing this budget update is what's going on with our public employees and the fact that many of them are home. Are we, I presume that we're aggressively pursuing any of the CARE Act or payroll protections, acts that are out there. I hope, I don't think that they're all associated with just private industry and small business. Are we aggressively pursuing those things?
Yeah, to the extent that we can apply for anything that as a public sector, as a public agency, we can get reimbursed for in any way, shape, or form from FEMA or from anybody else, we will pursue that. I did have an email conversation with the fire chief today to make sure that we are on board with the FEMA CARE Act and signing on to that, which we have to be by Friday, I believe, to qualify for all that. It doesn't take that long to do it, but make sure that we're doing that, and then we'll go from there.
And the CARE Act is one component, one effort that's going on. Are there others out there? I know SBA is focused obviously on private business, but are there other components of the CARE Act or components of the some of the new legislation that I've heard is going on in the Congress that looks like it might help our public employees?
I'm not sure at this point. I have not seen anything other than what has been presented by the state through many of the executive orders, especially those associated with sales tax, where it benefits businesses, and the information that's come out with respect to benefited employees, and providing them the leave that they need, and expansion to the FMLA program. All of those things ultimately do impact us in some way, shape, or form, or can impact us in some way, shape, or form. But whether or not we're eligible for reimbursement on some of that stuff remains to be seen.
Okay. Well, obviously we want to try to monitor that the best we can. One of your early slides, Andy, you talked about TOT and a what I considered a fairly modest reduction of $62,000 in our anticipated TOT from whatever our typical total is. Given that I think most of our hotels are largely full, and I know that they're, largely empty, and I hope, I think that there are other programs. I don't want to say executive orders because I don't know they're coming from the governor's office, but there's other programs that are enticing hotel owners to rent out at low or no cost for our first responders and other folks who have symptoms, and due to their symptomatic nature, they get a reduced or a free room. Is that a part of this analysis showing what I think is a relatively modest reduction in our TOT? I know we're looking in the crystal ball here, Andy. I'm not trying to be critical, but it's.
Fortunately for TOT, unlike sales tax, the TOT special it's for the Holiday Inn, which is our biggest TOT payer out of all 3 or 4 of them that we have. The Holiday Inn pays monthly, and because they pay monthly, their TOT return is due by the end of the month following the month finish. So their March return will be due in April. That gives us a much better idea about exactly what's going on with the TOT. One thing that I do know is potentially going on at the Holiday Inn as well is you've got a lot of PG&E folks that are staying there. And that really hasn't waned from my understanding. So hopefully when we receive our March information sometime this month in April, we'll be able to have a much better gauge on where TOT is going.
And as far as we know, there's no state action that would defer those payments.
So the only thing I know about the state being involved with anything TOT is the fact that they are allowing counties to negotiate with certain hotels, motels, to house public safety individuals and or homeless individuals. And that to the extent they're doing that, I know the counties are working with the cities to see if they can defer any, do away with any TOT that's being paid. My understanding, I don't have any communication with any hotel yet on that, but that's all I know about that.
Okay. I had questions on Nevada Street project and checking in on cost overruns, but this is more of a financial overview, so I'll hold on those questions for now. The insurance cost increases that you mentioned, $230,000. Can you touch on that again for me? What's driving those increases?
I can only speculate that it would generally insurance increases across the board are happening. Okay, but I can only speculate that it's related to the Paradise issue. And because the city of Paradise is part of the Northern California City Self-Insurance Fund as well. And this may be some fallout as a result of that. But that's speculation at this point.
So Andy, you mentioned it's a $230,000 increase. Do you have a ballpark of what % increase that is for us?
No, I want to say it was 24%, right around there.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'll check in a little bit, Mr. Spuckley, but if it's much different than that, I'll let you know.
Okay. My favorite subject next, CalPERS. Obviously, their returns are down. You mentioned they're down. They're a negative 4% currently. Some of the reports I've read, they're at for the year a net loss of $69 billion. We've seen what they do to us in our local budgets in the past. Any gauges, any industry talk in your world that gives us some glimpse of how we plan for this? Because obviously, just looking at a negative 4%, I mean, we saw some of the, some of the results out of the recession. This loss that they're talking about that they currently are seeing is greater than they saw in the Great Recession. So is there any information? You mentioned a meeting last week or a conference last week with CalPERS. I just see this as being the Achilles for the city of Auburn. This is just overwhelming what could potentially happen with respect to, them saying, hey, we lost $69 billion this year, and guess what, cities and counties, you guys are going to make up the difference. Any thoughts on how we plan for this potential?
Well, your council has planned for it on a couple of fronts. Number one, you have your pension stabilization reserve. You've separated that out as a component of your reserves, the $2.2 million. So you have that. The general philosophy behind using a pension stabilization reserve is you're going to use that to mitigate wide swings in budgetary exposure from year to year related to CalPERS. A return of -5% would have a significant impact, obviously, on the unfunded liability and the normal cost. The unfunded liability cost would go up starting in fiscal 22-23, so it'd be 2 years out, and it would ramp up for a period of 5 years. The only saving grace for a large loss, like 5% or something more than that for the current fiscal year, is that hopefully whatever this COVID-19 thing ends up doing to our fiscal picture, that ultimately the markets do return to some semblance of normalcy, and that we do have on the other end a better year, something where CalPERS can make more than 7% to at least help mitigate the exposure to a -5 or more percent. I don't think it's going to mitigate everything because when you lose 5%, you lose 5%, and it's a lot harder to get that back because your base is now lower. Ultimately, your unfunded liability costs will go up, but what I worry about is the normal cost, which is the costs that our current employees are exposed to that we have for the city of Auburn right now. That normal cost, if CalPERS loses between around 5% in their portfolio, that normal cost will go up between 3 and 12%, depending on whether or not you're a miscellaneous employee or a safety employee, and whether or not you're PEPRA or Classic. When you start talking about increases in ongoing costs associated with your existing workforce that add even 10% of payroll, that means for every dollar that you're paying our employees in pensionable payroll, we're paying another dime for CalPERS normal costs, in addition to whatever our unfunded liability goes up. One thing CalPERS did say is that they are working to see if there is any hope for future stimulus that they may be able to tap into to alleviate some of the ultimate pain that's going to ensue in 2 years if they have a bad year, a significantly bad year this year. That remains to be seen. I don't know. I don't know where that will be following that as well. I will say, however, that I was pretty impressed by the fact that CalPERS last week was as transparent as they were, and they really spelled out exactly what was going on. It was extremely timely, meaning that I've never seen CalPERS provide a return to date 1 week after the close of a fiscal period. It's usually months before we see how they're doing. And typically it's not until August or September when we know exactly how they finished the fiscal year. So
that's a rare bright side there. So I guess we'll take that. Last thing I have real quickly, I've read some articles about counties in the state's response to the COVID-19 crisis with releasing prisoners, lower offense, non-violent, they say, prisoners from state and county jails, state prisons, county jails. I presume that our police chief is on that and in communication with Placer County Parole Department and what impacts that might have on our community. I guess where I'm going with that is I see a potential increase for us dealing with this, because from what I understand, and I don't know all the details, but I'd like to hear maybe a report in the upcoming meeting or following meeting from Chief Canan on what this is going to do to us in our communities, because that's pretty scary when they're talking about releasing offenders, and they say nonviolent offenders, but every time, you know, they kind of ratchet that trigger up, meaning more and more bad guys are getting out there on the streets. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Andy, for your report. Well done. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Councilwoman Mackey, go ahead.
Hi, Andy. Thank you very much for this overview and presentation. It's really very explanatory and helps a lot. I am concerned about our businesses getting back to work and people getting back to work, and it's hard to really, I can't even imagine how you can forecast what's going to happen. So you did a pretty good job of it. So thanks. I appreciate that. I do want to ask you about, I'm a little confused about the, I know the $111,000 is what we're going to have to take out of the general fund for the firefighters.
Right.
But I thought that we had there's a 172,500 and then 216,500 as an increase in the fire department budget, right?
Yeah,
Non-personnel.
Are you talking about the general fund?
Yes.
Okay.
And then there were the grants. There was a one-time PSPS grant and the 130,000. So that all adds up to, I didn't add it up. I thought I added it up. Is that all that goes together, and then that's where we come up with the $111,000 deficit that has to come out of the general fund?
Yeah, so there's a few things going on in the fire department bullet in the presentation where I talk about the 456,292.
Yeah.
That 456,292 does not have anything to do with the 111,000.
Oh, okay.
That the 111,000 is one of the very last bullets in the same group of slides.
Yes.
On transfer or all other appropriations, the very last bullet. That's embedded in that $73,000 number in that very last bullet in the same group.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Okay. So, and I understand your explanation as to why we were a little bit short. So hopefully we won't be short too much longer. We have to figure out a way to pay for our firefighters. Speaking of that, I noticed that we paid for the polling out of the Economic Development Director's budget, non-personal services. Is that correct? Sales tax polling in the economic.
So the Economic Development Budget Department or department budget had not personal services and non-personal services.
Right.
A lot of non-personal services are being incurred as things continue to go on or are spent, but it's the personal services side that's not. So you'll see salary savings there.
Right, right. So the sales tax polling contract came out of the non-personal services, that's what you're saying.
Exactly.
And so I do want to comment on the increase in the $100,000 for the attorney's fees. We did budget a low amount because we thought this year we would do a little better on our attorney's fees, but obviously we have not. Because that puts it at now 330,000, am I correct?
We're a little bit higher. So the budget for city attorney is now, I'm just looking at it real quick.
Well, it was 230.
130, yeah.
Yeah. So now it's going to be 330. And that's just till the end of June. So, boy, I don't know, maybe we should hire an attorney on staff. I keep saying that.
They'd be pretty taxed.
Of course, Gary is pretty much on staff, isn't he? Okay, so then the okay, Matt asked that question and that's all clear. So the Nevada Street project transportation fund revenues, that $152,000 came from PCWA.
Correct, yeah. The reimburse, there's certain things that PCWA is reimbursing us for or paying for. So
Yeah.
that went up a little bit. I think we had 900 and something thousand budgeted and it's a little over $1 million now.
Okay, so it increased for that. Okay, all right. And then that $345,000 remaining in the transportation fund, is that going towards street overlay? Or it's just there?
It could. It could. So as we put the budget together and these numbers start to flesh themselves out a little more, and we know pretty much where they're going to end up, we'll come back and we'll say, you've got this much available in the transportation fund to do anything you want for a transportation related purpose in the future. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Let's make
Those are
that
all
happen,
questions
Cheryl.
I have. Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions for Andy on this subject?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, thanks. Andy, I second or third the comments. Very good presentation, very helpful. I do have just a clarifying question though on, I think it was page 6, where you showed the estimated sales tax and you have it now at $455,000. Just to be clear, and I know you're getting back there. Yeah, just to be clear, is this before or after you use your methodology to estimate the loss of revenue due to COVID so far? After, okay. And then in your methodology, is that somehow take into account an estimate of how long the stay-at-home orders last and how long the economy takes to pick back up, or will this need to be revised if the stay-at-home orders go beyond May 1st?
I don't know. I don't think it'll. I didn't really look at it from a stay-at-home order perspective. I looked at it from where I thought we would end up for the full quarter based on businesses being shut. To the extent the stay-at-home order involves businesses reopening and the economy getting back on track and all of that, yes. So if that comes back sooner than maybe by the end of the fiscal year, then I need to look at this and see how that may impact next fiscal year. Because depending on how it comes back, how quickly it comes back and you know, or how it, you know, is staged to come back, that's going to play into these forecasts. Once I have the forecast from HDL later this week, I'll have a lot more data than I have right now. And I'll be able to put some better models together to give you a better idea of what's going to happen in certain scenarios.
Okay, I appreciate that. On Nevada Street, when would we anticipate to see final costs in this fiscal year of hopefully savings that could then be redistributed elsewhere? Do you have any idea?
You know, I'm going to defer to Chris on that. I think Chris is on the call too. Are you there, Chris? Chardella?
Chris left after the consent calendar is my understanding.
Oh, okay. You know, if this project is supposed to be finished by the end of the year, then we'll have a pretty good idea. I know that there's a lot of bills being paid for the project. We can follow up with the Public Works Group, Chris, and find out exactly where this project is and give you guys an update.
Yeah, I definitely, and I think I am echoing somebody, one of my counterparts earlier, but we have always now been told that this fiscal year, sometime towards the end of it, we would know whether the cost estimates that we estimated higher would actually be lower, and so there would be dollars that could be reinvested into an overlay project or with everything that's going on into any other expenditure. So I definitely want to make sure that we're staying on top of where we are with those costs sooner than later, because again, we have the ability to, as we had planned, put it to street overlay, or if it's needed due to COVID-19 impacts, fill a budget hole. So definitely want to see circle back on Nevada Street, specifically on the final cost of Nevada Street. I think it's already been requested, and again, I too won't belabor it here, but I think we're going to need to see a full accounting audit of the project to really understand where that money all came from and where it all went. So just on a note, we're watching that one. The legal costs, I agree with Councilwoman Mackey. And I realize that we do contract with a number of other legal firms to do other specialty items for us. But I definitely think that, you know, we need to continue to look at, could we bring down our legal costs in some fashion. And that's no disrespect to Gary and to Michael Colantuno's firm, because I think they both do a great job for us. And I think, and it's been said at these meetings before, but people don't realize the amount of money this city is spending defending itself on oftentimes frivolous lawsuits. And I think adding another 100,000 to it just, exemplifies that. And I realize that's not really a question, so I will move on. Councilwoman Mackey asked some questions about the fire department and Fund 63, and I just want to dive into that just a little bit further. In your revenue estimates in the presentation for Fund 63, are you including the revenue or reimbursement from the Resource Conservation District when you when you have the revenue number that's up there on the screen now?
Yeah, I'm including, and I worked with the fire chief on this to include anything in this fiscal year's budget, 1920's budget, that was due to be received. So whatever was estimated to be received from the Resource Conservation District for this year, whether that is the $62,500 that I have under grant funding, shaded field break / other, as a line item on that fund page in your hand, whether it includes that or not, for the resource district, I don't know. That's perhaps Dave can help me out on that. But all the other revenue sources are what's anticipated to be received and working with him to offset the costs.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear because in the presentation you specifically talked about out-of-county strike teams, and I know that that's a huge component, as is the pre-positioning that the fire department was able to do this year, really for maybe the first time. So I just want to make sure that that revenue is inclusive of all three of those items, not just the standard out-of-county strike team dollars.
It is, yes.
And then on the expenditures, you have it coming down a little bit. Is this a true cost of the current employees? Because one of the things that I was somewhat under the impression was that when it was all said and done and we actually hired the 7 individuals that we did, their total costs were at the lower end. They were newer employees. So they started at the bottom of the salary schedule. They are post-PEPRA employees. Right. Their benefits are lower. So is this expenditure number that we're seeing truly been adjusted, or is there still some things to be done to bring down the expenditures down?
Presentation, it's going to be around 700 grand fully loaded costs. These costs I think were like maybe from August forward, so there's only 11 months worth of costs in here. And then you had some transitions as people left and people came on, so you had some vacancy statements there, but we had all 7 positions filled for the entire year. And on top of that, had the non-personal costs associated with them, with things like the uniforms and other just related equipment costs that are needed to support these 7 firefighters. It's going to be about $700,000 a year.
So it's actually going to be higher than what we estimated in the original budget?
No, I think in the original budget it was like 583 okay. For when we originally put it together. I think I have it here. 579 for staff and 50,000 for non.
Okay.
629 it was, well, actually it's there, 20 budget, 629. So it's going to be about 700.
Okay.
Next year.
Some other questions after the meeting to help maybe me fully understand those. Okay. The general fund balance that you showed, and I didn't write down what page that was on, but do you have an idea, or have you noted it yet, of what's the overall percentage that fund balance, not this page, the one that has the table in it that projects out, I think, the next 7 years, but do you have a percentage of the fund balance per year?
For, well, you mean 40% number that's at the bottom there?
Yeah, but I'm let me look on my list. I think it's the very next slide, page. Oh,
this one. Okay.
There you go. Yeah. Well, is it possible to get this table with the fund balance percentages going across, so we kind of see where, with everything that's happening, what does this do for our overall fund balance as a percentage?
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. But, okay, so it is on the next slide.
It's actually on this table. I just didn't include that row. So.
Okay. And then I'll just end with one last thing. I definitely, for one, would like to see financial updates at the following meetings, until the foreseeable future, based on everything that's happening and all the changes. I think that this type of an update and reminder of where we are and any new changes, developments that come out, whether it's new methodologies or new state mandates for holding our revenue, anything like that. So again, thanks for the presentation, and I'll follow up with you on some of my questions about the fire department budget.
Okay, no problem.
Councilwoman Amara.
Mayor Kirby, I appreciate, Andy, your clear presentation. Must have been very, very difficult. I can't even imagine. But it was very clear. And the questions that were asked by the fellow council members were detailed questions and answered most of my questions. I do agree. We do need to look at legal cost and the Nevada Street project to see, check the status on that, on those things. And I guess, Andy, you had indicated, this is a crapshoot and we don't know where we'll end up. So, I mean, is it time that we look at cutbacks or holding, onto, having holds on expenditures due to the uncertainty here?
I'm looking at Bob.
Sandy, I think we're going to be having those discussions over the next several weeks. We'll be doing most of those in the closed sessions. What we need with the council, now that we have a baseline estimate of where we're going, now we start to put together what the organization will look like in the future. What are your comfort levels as the city council with different levels of service that we will be providing? And then ultimately be able to structure a budget that really balances out the short-term and long-term risks, where the city stands financially with the COVID issue, as well as what's the balancing it off with what is the real level of service that you can live with for your community. And we're going to have a lot of discussions to come up with that correct balance that you're looking for.
Okay, yes, I think that's important. I think Councilman Berlant indicated at the next meeting and subsequent meetings, we should continue to have updates in this discussion because especially, I know COVID will end. We don't know how things will come back, but also the oil situation isn't good for us. So yeah, I would appreciate that. And then with that being said, so that's it. That's all I have for now.
All right. Andy, once again, thank you for a thorough and very good report. It actually seems a little bit rosier than I would have expected, considering the downturn in our obviously local economy and the oil issue. I'm quite surprised by that.
Yep.
And as we talked, I think we do need to have some very serious discussions about emergency ordinances and what we're going to do to cut costs in the near term, because I actually think we're entering a worse crisis than people think. I think we're going to be shut down completely through the summer the way things are going right now. And that's a real tragedy. The idea of opening up in May, I think is insane. So that's a real problem. As to a couple other things, legal costs, yeah, they're high. But as everybody alluded to, and the public may not know this, the frivolous lawsuits we've had to defend and deal with have been unbelievable by our own self-serving citizens who have decided the city was a mark for money. And we've been forced to defend against those, and that's a real tragedy. The other thing is, on the sweeper, we had talked, they were talking about getting a motor, but they also said it's an old sweeper and the motor may be a problem, even if we put it in. And they were going to look into maybe renting one and seeing if that was available and what they would cost. Obviously, a new one is what, $600,000. Is that even a possibility, or has that been explored?
I can check into that.
Okay, because my impression was when the $30,000 might replace the motor, but it's not going to give us a new machine.
Yeah.
I'll have to work with Public Works to see what that looks like.
All right. Other than that, I think it's a great report. I do think we need reports frequently because of the fact that things are changing so quickly. I'm once again surprised it's a lot rosier than I thought. But I think this downturn is going to last a while, and we're going to need to take some drastic measures. Any other comments on this?
I have one public comment for this item.
Go ahead.
Andy, is it okay if I take your screen away?
Yeah.
This will be quick. You guys can see that?
There we go.
I could make that full screen, but I think it's.
I think it works.
Okay. And that's also a public comment that you received ahead of time and will be available in the record. That's all.
I think that public comment does reflect a lot of things we've been saying. Entertain a motion at this time, or is anybody else in the council? Anybody want to make a motion? Resolution?
Well, I guess I'll do it. I will move a resolution to increase in the estimate for earned revenue in the city's general fund by $1,052,985 to $13,437 and 125. Oh, $13,437,125.
I'll second.
The resolution will cover items A through D.
Any other public comment? Any other comment before we go ahead?
Okay, all right.
All right, call the question.
Councilmember Mackey. Oh, was that seconded? I'm sorry, I missed the second.
I seconded it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Councilmember Mackey.
Aye.
Amara.
Aye.
Berlant.
Aye.
Spokley.
Yes.
And Mayor Kirby.
Aye. Is that covered A through D, so that covered all of them, correct?
That is my understanding.
That's my understanding
Well,
too.
I had started out doing them one by one, but if you want to just do them all in one fell swoop, that's fine with me.
My second was for all of them.
All right, so
Okay.
everybody
My motion was for all of
understands.
them.
All right, everybody
Yeah.
understands that, and that's
Yes.
done. That ends the business right now. The committee reports, I think we're going to suspend for this evening. Before we go, I have one additional comment. Yes, the city council did ask me to suspend my comments on Facebook prior to, and that was prior to the coronavirus thing, which had been very personally damaging. And I want to apologize to the entire city council and the staff for the time this has taken and the distraction. It certainly wasn't where I intended to go, and the city didn't need it. So I apologize for that. With that, the meeting's adjourned, and we'll go to closed session. So we're gonna have to adjourn this meeting, I guess, and reopen in another Zoom thing.
If you could take a motion to adjourn into closed session.
Oh,
Yeah.
motion.
I move we adjourn to closed session.
And I'll second it.
I'm actually going to roll call that just because
roll
this is a
call.
virtual meeting, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Councilmember Mackey,
Aye.
Amara,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Spokley,
Yes.
and Mayor Kirby.
Aye, and then you're gonna help us go into this closed session?
Mayor, if I can just add one comment before the
Go
closed
ahead.
session. Given the nature of the closed sessions this evening, there will not be any portable action out of closed session. I understand the video is now ending, and so I'd just like to note that for those viewing.
But we will reopen another session for us, correct?
There will not be a session in Zoom, so no,
So how are we gonna do it?
it'll be by phone.
Oh, interesting. All right, somebody's gonna have to help us with that. Thank you very much. Then the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.